Okay, continuing with Derech Hashem. So we are more than halfway through the Sefer Baruch Hashem. We are in the third part. There's 4 parts to the book. We're in part 3, chapter 4, Mikra HaNevuah, prophetic experience, and all the way at the end of the chapter, almost at the end. So we discussed the Derech Hashem, just to kind of jog our memories, discussed the idea of Nevuah, of prophecy, and he made a very interesting point that Nevuah, prophecy, is really something that needs to be learned. It's not something that I think a lot of us have the impression that prophecy is like you just have that prophetic experience and God just drops it into your head. And the Ramchal said that it's really not true at all. It's really delicate thing that needs to be done very carefully and needs to be, the prophet needs to be trained in how to interpret different things and also how to rise himself to that lofty spiritual level where he's able to receive a clear prophetic message. That is what the Ramchal was saying. And he said that it's very possible for a prophet to get things wrong if he's not properly trained and he, tries things that are kind of beyond his league. That was an important, a very interesting, important point that he made there. Okay, let's continue now. So we're now in part 3, chapter 4, and we are in paragraph 10. So now he was on the topic. The very, very last point that he was talking about is the idea of false prophets and, the prophets of the idols. So he writes here, what we said in the first part, Parak Chamisha, the 5th chapter, from kochas atuma that are found in the world, ufo'alim kifi mashehu chak betivam v'nimsar biyadam. Me'osam kochas atuma shnimtsaim ba'olam that are found in the world, ufo'alim kifi mashehu chak betivam, they operate according to what's said in their nature, v'nimsar biyadam, given over into their hands. So I mentioned this idea of kochas atuma, of the forces of impurity, and that there's real power to the kind of the forces of impurity in the world, and it is a inappropriate but a real way to access certain divine knowledge. They have the ability to cause a person to make a mistake, by giving him certain hashpa'os, in ways that seem similar to true prophecy. They'll reveal to him certain things. Some are true and some are false. They will show him certain revelations, like the pasuk says explicitly about the false prophet. He'll give you a sign, he'll do a wonder. So it's just because he's a false prophet doesn't mean he's incapable of performing miracles. That the kochas atuma have the power to allow him to perform a miracle, specifically to give him the power to fool people. So I just need to pause for 1 second because this could happen even unwillingly. It could be the prophet is not even trying to tap into the kochos atuma, the forces of impurity and of evil, but it happens. Sometimes it does happen willingly. That is to say, this experience can happen. He didn't try, he didn't exert any effort to make that happen. Oh, it could be he's trying to do the opposite. He's trying to have a real proper prophecy, trying to receive a prophecy from Hashem, but instead he ends up getting a message that's coming through the kochas atuma, through the powers of impurity. Now, how would that happen? Because he wasn't complete in his actions and in his efforts, meaning he didn't do his job. He wasn't an A+ student. You know what I mean? He didn't make sure to become an expert at prophecy, and he's trying in things that he's really not ready for, and therefore he doesn't realize that the message that he's getting is really coming from the wrong place. But it could also happen that it comes to someone who's trying to do that because he's a wicked person. He's trying to grasp that. He's going after these powers, and he's specifically trying to cling to them willingly, to grasp whatever he's able to grasp. He's trying to get revelations through them. He is trying to access these kochos atoma, these powers of impurity, to be able to prove himself as a prophet. He wants everyone to think that he's a prophet, so he uses the kochos atoma, these powers of impurity, to get a window into the future and to be able to tell people what's going to happen in the future. And then it happens, and then he says, haha, you see, I'm a great prophet. But really, it's not true. He's really a liar. He's a fake. And he's got evil ways, devious ways that he's tapping into this knowledge. The same kamoshach and he fools them as he wishes, or sometimes he just does it for honor. He's not trying to get people to do certain things. He just wants respect when he's not really there. From this type were the prophets of the Baal, which is a certain idol, and the Asherah, the idolatrous tree. They would exert themselves on this. This was their expertise, was to be able to channel the kochos hatuma, the powers of evil, until they were clinging to these kochos, these forces, and they're able to grasp a little bit, a little something. Through that, they were able to persuade those who trusted them. And they were also able to perform certain wonders, to be assigned to their prophecy, as we've mentioned. However, very important, they themselves knew that this was only coming to them through evil means. That which was selected by them. They know themselves that they're not true prophets, but rather they're doing this because they're wicked. However, you could have a sincere Navi. He wants to do what's right. He wants to be a real prophet. He really wants to receive a real message from Hashem. But he could still end up receiving a message through the wrong channels. And therefore, that's why they needed an expert teacher to train them, as we've mentioned. Through him, they would be saved. So this is what the Ramchal is saying, that there's a big danger in prophecy because the amateur prophet is not going to necessarily know the difference between a message he's receiving through, the proper channels, and a message he's receiving through impure channels. He may not necessarily know the difference. That's why he needs an expert teacher to train him. And he's got to continue with this training until he comes to the true level of prophecy. Once he reaches the level of a full prophet, then he'll know it himself. Then he'll know the difference between where it's coming from. And it'll be impossible for him to have any doubts. There's no question. For the real trained expert prophets, when they've really arrived on that level, then they know for themselves where it's coming from. They know when it's coming from Hashem, and they know when it's coming from an impure source. But the amateur prophets, they don't know the difference. And you could have some more expert prophets, but they're wicked, and they intentionally turn to the powers of evil and the impure channels for their sources of knowledge. Okay, let's continue. V'hinei, we're up to number 11. V'hinei min haderech hazeh ha'inyan shekar l'nevi'ei Achav b'ruach shepitam. It's in this way that the episode of the prophets of Achav occurred with a spirit that persuaded them. So just to give you a little bit of background, the Ramchal will explain a little bit more as we continue. But there's a very interesting episode which was the ultimate demise of the king, the wicked king Achav. So the wicked king Achav believed in idolatry. He promoted idolatry, and he had a whole host of idolatrous prophets, the Nevi'ei Habal. And they were his advisors and his everything. That was Achav. That was his name. So in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided he's going to get rid of this guy, this Achav, he wants him to die. And he had a specific place where he wanted him to die in battle. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu kind of says to his angels, how are we going to get him to go there and to fall in battle? And a certain spirit comes to Hashem and says, I'll do it. I'll fool them all. And what happens is that this spirit kind of comes to all of the prophets of Achav, and he gives them a prophecy that Achav is going to go to battle in this specific place, and he'll have a tremendous victory, and will be a tremendous honor, and will be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the prophets come to Achav, and they tell him this, and he gets all excited, and we're going to do this, and we're going to fight, and we're going to win. And there's one true prophet who says to Achav, you're going to die if you go. And he gets very upset at this prophet, and he goes anyways, and he dies. That's the story. So now let's take a look at the Ramchal. So the Ramchal says that episode is what we're talking about right now, where there are different powers that can influence the prophets, and if they're amateur, they won't necessarily know the difference. They won't know for sure where it's coming from. That was the name of the place. Hashem decreed Achav should die in Ramos Gilad. There needed to be a really strong persuasion, so that he would pursue this battle. And he wouldn't turn away from it. It had to be such a good persuasion that not only would Achav go out to battle, but when things started to look bad, he would persevere. He would keep trying until he actually got killed himself. Even though things would happen that would normally stop him. Hashem needed Achav to be so convinced that he would keep fighting even when things started happening that would normally cause him to retreat. That's what needed to happen. The Kamasha Era Lo Be'emes, which is actually what happens. Sh'amalo Yehoshaphat. Yehoshaphat was the other king that teamed up with Achav in this battle. V'roshna kayomes dvar Hashem v'chulei v'hisbig lo nevuas hahem. Shkol zayit safui l'fan of Yisborach. This was their prophecy didn't do them any good. Yehoshaphat wasn't sure if this was a good idea, and they turned to their prophets. Should we go to this battle? Says the Ramchal, their prophecy didn't help them at all. Because the judgment had already been decreed by the heavenly court, they persecuted against them, and the nizmonim inyanim fatoso, they prepared ways to persuade them. The nimsa yozer hagan inyan ruach. What ended up being the best way was this spirit. The who, and this was kikol osam nevia hashekar hayimis nabim le'enov b'fanav shlachav. All of his false prophets would come and prophesy before Achav, that wicked king. V'hainu shayu osim hamazim imshtadim ba'osam hanyanim. They would do what they always do, shalideim nimshach gila hanevua, which is how they would achieve their prophecy. They weren't the real deal, these prophets. So they didn't know, and they didn't even try to work hard enough to rise themselves to the level where they could have a true prophecy from Hashem. They would try to fool the king. And they tried to portray themselves as drawing down Hashem's message. So that, you have to understand what the Ramchal is getting at. They were the perfect victims. Hashem was using them as his tools because they wouldn't know the difference anyways, because they weren't expert prophets themselves. So they were set up, it was all a setup. They were the perfect victims to fall prey to this spirit that was gonna fool them and convince them that this was really the truth. They got what they wanted. They wanted to get a message about this battle, and they got it. And this just made the king believe them even more. That's exactly what the pasuk says. All the prophets were prophesying before them. The words that came to them were as follows: Alei, rise up, v'hatzlach, you shall be successful. V'nosan Hashem biyad hamelech, and Hashem will deliver them into the hand of the king. Those are the words that the prophets told Achav about this battle. Ela hayu advarim shayu haruach hahu medaber befihem. These are the words that ruach, that spirit, put into their mouths. They weren't making a mistake themselves. They knew what they did in terms of their prophecy. Achav was the one who made the mistake, and he allowed himself to be fooled. He didn't believe the true prophet, which was Michayahu, because he had so much faith in his own false prophets. Michayahu was the true prophet I told you about. He was the Navi Hashem. He was the prophet of Hashem. He's the one who told Achav, you're going to die. If you go, you will be killed. Achav was furious. How dare you say that about the king? Because he had 100 of his own false prophets say that he'll be victorious. And that's what he chose to believe. V'amnam tzidkayahu ben Kanana Hosav al Shar Neviim Ha'im. Tzidkayahu ben Kenana, he joined all the false prophets. They were all following the message they were getting from that spirit. But Tzidkayahu added and tried to do something similar to what a true prophet would do. He believed in this revelation. He thought it was the truth. And he was the one that tried to draw a message from Hashem until he sinned and he said, this is what Hashem has said. He was not well trained enough. He didn't know the difference between true and false. This is why the Gemara uses this prophet Tzidkayahu as the example of a prophet who sins by saying something that he did not hear. Why is that? Because he presented, I don't know what the right word is. He claimed that this message of go battle and you'll be successful was coming from Hashem. He was the one that added that little detail. All the other prophets of Achav never mentioned Hashem. They just said, rise up, you will be successful, and Hashem will deliver them into your hand. They never said Hashem has said. Tzidkayahu came along and he's added those words, Hashem has said. Writes the Ramchal, that added a whole nother level because Tzidkayahu ben Kenana, he was taking this spirit and claiming that it was actually a message from Hashem. That was a big mistake because that was saying something that he didn't hear. Chen Amru, and also Chazal say, Ruach Navos at Is'e. The spirit of Navos misled him. They also say, he should have been more careful. Just as Yehoshaphat warned, two prophets never have the exact same prophecy. So he should have known from that there's something wrong about this. Every single prophet was using the exact same words. That's a sign that there's something wrong about this. But he didn't pay close enough attention because he was caught up in the excitement of this effort. Okay, now we have the Gemara in Sanhedrin. All of these false prophets of Achav revealed an even greater revelation than what they usually receive. But they're shown in and in a different way than they were used to. Tzidkiah, and so much so that even Tzidkiah made a mistake. It fooled even him to be convinced that this one time the prophets of Achav were correct. Even though they normally turned to impurity. This was all caused by Hashem himself, as we mentioned, and now you can understand this well. So here the Ramchal is taking this very unique story and he's demonstrating his position that there's different ways in which a prophet can receive his message. That's what you see from this story. And an untrained prophet can make a mistake as to where it's coming from and not necessarily know. And that's what we see from this story, that this ruach, this spirit, was sent to fool all these prophets, And even a well-meaning Tzidkiyahu ben Kanana, who was not a wicked man, even he fell for it. Even he was able to be fooled by a alternative source, which he mistakenly thought was actually coming from Hashem. That's what we see there. But as Ramchal adds, a true Navi Hashem who's properly trained by an expert is able to tell the difference. So that's the difference. Okay, we'll hold it here for tonight. Next week we'll continue with the new chapter, chapter 5, which is the difference between standard prophets and Moshe Rabbeinu, which is a very, very important topic for understanding Judaism and understanding the significance of the fact that the Torah is given specifically through Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, I wish you all a wonderful night. Yeshakayach, thank you for joining.
Thank you.